Walters will be open at 9 a.m. on Thursday, July 4th, ahead of the 11 a.m. holiday game. Make sure to swing by Walters before seeing James Wood and the Nats.
The 2-2 blasted left center field for Siri. He may have another one. Way back it goes, and it is gone. Siri has dialed up 2 home runs tonight. A line smash over the left center field wall. That's 3-0 Rays.
Here's a pitch that's taken outside for a ball by left-handed batting James Wood. Wood is 21 years old. He turned pro out of high school in Maryland. 5 out of 11 this spring with 2 homers and 4 RBIs. He hits that one hard, deep center field, sending Scott back to the wall, and that one is out of here. That's a home run for Wood, going back-to-back with Thomas off Kyle Gibson.
And welcome to Nat Chat for Saturday, June 29th. 2024, along with MASNsports.com Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman, who was at Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. We have reached the numerical midpoint of the Nationals 2024 regular season. 81 games down, 81 games to go. The Nats record is 38-43. This off a 3-1 loss at the Tampa Bay Rays on Friday evening in game 1 of a 3-game series. The Nats now have lost 4 consecutive games, and there's plenty with this latest loss that we are going to talk about. But let's be honest, Monday evening cannot come soon enough, because Monday evening is when outfielder James Wood will be making his Major League regular season debut. Yes, finally, this is happening. This installment of the Nat Chat podcast brought to us by the DC Grays Baseball, an all-volunteer nonprofit that brings baseball and softball to kids in under-resourced neighborhoods of Washington, D.C. The Grays 2024 season now is underway. To donate and learn more about the Grays, visit DCGrays.com. We on Friday afternoon had reports, including one from Mark, that the Nats are promoting James Wood from AAA Rochester for Monday evening's game 1 of a 4-game series against the New York Mets at Nationals Park. That also is game 1 of an 8-game homestand. The Nats put out this news, leaked this news 3 days in advance of the news actually taking place. That is what you call driving up ticket sales. James Wood, the number 3 overall prospect in baseball per MLB Pipeline. James Wood, he on Friday evening in a 14-7 Rochester Red Wings win over the Indianapolis Indians, as Rochester starting left fielder and number 3 batter went 3 for 5 with 3 doubles and a walk. His OPS for Rochester this season up to 1,058. So, Mark, yeah, we will talk about this 3-1 loss at the Rays, but Friday and really this weekend, it's all about getting the Monday, man. It's all about James Wood.
Boy, I can think of some people that wouldn't have minded having that bat in the lineup on Friday night, though, right? Especially after Jesse Winker got hurt. Not to put too much pressure on the kid, but boy, you could sure use some of what he's been providing for Rochester all year, at least when he's been healthy. I think if we go back, I'm sure Tim has the clip somewhere of me saying one of my many predictions, most of which were wrong, but I think the most recent one, when he came back off the IL, I said, I'm looking at a long road trip here coming up this weekend, Colorado, San Diego, Tampa. And then I'm looking at a big homestand, July 4th week, Mets and Cardinals. Boy, it would be nice to see James Wood make his Major League debut sometime during that homestand, if not be there for that entire homestand. So my eye was kind of always on that first game Monday. I was surprised that the news got out a few days before that. That's pretty unconventional, especially for a position player. Sometimes for a pitcher, you find out a couple days in advance because it's not as big a deal. They don't still have to play, but James Wood is still playing all weekend. At least that's the plan from what I was told. Maybe he gets Sunday off while he's traveling. So it's a little bit odd, and it kind of leaves this thing hovering over the team all weekend as they know what's coming on Monday. They also know that means that somebody's losing their job prior to that point. And as I said, maybe prophetically, you never know what else could happen over the course of 3 days. And sure enough, something happened in this game that could have maybe messed up the plan. But big picture here, this is a moment we've been waiting for. To me, this is the most significant debut the Nationals have had since Juan Soto, maybe since Bryce Harper. I think I'm going to say Soto. I know that one kind of snuck up on people, and he was barely in the minor leagues to start that year. But we knew he was a big deal, and it was significant when he debuted. I would say this is at least with that. And if it's not that, then the only other ones that would compare to this in terms of hype coming into it are Steven Strasburg and Bryce Harper, I would argue.
I'm with you. This is a big deal. This is a really big deal. This is the biggest debut for a player during this Nats rebuild. Like, we've had other significant debuts. This is the biggest. And, we'll see how big the Dylan Cruz debut ends up being. But this is a really big deal. I think if you're a Nats fan, you have every reason to be excited. It is, though, a bit odd that we have 3 days of hype for this. I mean, it's impossible not to think that this is about business, right? The news is leaked on a Friday, and the debute's not happening until Monday. This does hover over the Nats this weekend. This does also make you say to yourself, well, if you know on Friday that he's ready for the majors, why isn't he in the majors on Friday? Like, why isn't he with the ball club for this series at the Rays, right? I mean, if it's all about baseball and it's all about trying to do as well as you can at the major league level, why wouldn't you just promote him now? Now, we understand why, because there's an 8-game homestand coming up, but it does stand out. And I was thinking about these other much-hyped Nationals player debuts, right? Strasburg, Harper, Rendon, Soto. We've never had 3 days of hype for one of these debuts, have we? I mean, this is like a really big buildup, the likes of which, to your point, you rarely see. Usually when a big-time prospect is being promoted to the majors, the news is leaked the day before. We have reports the day before, and then like the morning after or the day after, the team officially promotes the guy to the majors. This is, again, 3 days before the news is actually going to happen. Davey Martinez wouldn't even confirm to you guys before the game on Friday that the news is happening.
Right. So I think Strasburg was several days out. And again, because it was a pitcher and you knew what their schedule was, and that was one they wanted to let people know well in advance because they knew it was a big deal. But for position players, I don't remember it unless there was maybe an off day prior to a homestand. And so maybe they did it, 2 days before, but there weren't any games in between. I really don't remember a case where a player in theory knew he was being called up to the big leagues, but still had games to play in the minors. And I don't know the exact details of how James Wood found out about this. I really hope someone told him before the news broke and that he didn't find out that way. I'd like to believe that that's true. I don't think they would allow that news to get out in that manner. As you said, they're not saying anything officially on the record, but I can just tell you that club officials are not exactly denying it either. They were more than happy to confirm the news. I think they want this out there, obviously, and build up some hype for it. But yeah, it does make for a weird weekend. The other part of that is, sounds like everything went well for him on Friday, but like, do you put him in bubble wrap? Do you just have him DH Saturday? I mean, he played in the field. There are so many things that can happen between now and then. You hope that none of that does happen, but it's not the kind of situation we're used to seeing for someone like this.
I think he for sure should not play on Sunday. I think it's debatable whether he should play on Saturday. He had another big game on Friday night, so why not just let him exit on a high note in terms of his time at Rochester? But yeah, it does make for some things that we're not so used to when it comes to a prospect being promoted. But the bottom line is that James Wood is coming. It's great to see this. And you mentioned the Jesse Winker situation. So, I almost felt sorry for Eddie Rosario because in the hours leading up to this game on Friday evening, basically everyone was saying, well, this probably is it for Eddie Rosario. He has been struggling big time. He would seem to be the corresponding roster move to James Wood being promoted. And then we got what happened with Jesse Winker on Friday evening. Now, we'll see if this is in fact a significant injury, an injured list worthy injury. And how about how this injury was suffered? So Jesse Winker on Friday evening was the Nats starting left fielder and number 3 batter. He went 0 for 1. He left the game due to hurting his right leg. And how he hurt his right leg was something. This actually is one of the highlights of the Nats season, just in terms of the visual. Bottom of the first.
Here's the pitch. Swinging a fly ball left field. Winker chasing back onto the warning track. He stumbles and falls, and he still is able to make the catch. And Winker's hurt. Oh my goodness, what a play.
As Winker stumbled, hurt the leg, but then somehow made the catch while falling down at the wall. The degree of difficulty on this is like a 10 out of 10. I got to bow down to Jesse Winker for making that catch. Now, how he's doing, we'll see. But boy, that as a snapshot, that as an individual play really was something.
So he jokingly told us afterwards that he said he wishes he could claim that it was some kind of great athletic play on his part. He said he got lucky. The ball caught him, not the other way around. So he acknowledges his defensive deficiencies, which is maybe important as we move forward with James Wood perhaps taking over his position in the field here in a couple of days. He knows who he is, and he wasn't trying to hide the fact that he was very fortunate to somehow end up with the ball in his glove. Now, what happened, watching it live, I thought he got his foot caught in like the fence as he was going back on the ball. He said his cleat actually got caught in the turf as he's running back, and it twisted his knee, his right knee. And this is the same thing that he did when he got caught around second base a couple weeks ago. And what looked like a really bad injury and turned out not to be. He is really hoping and believing that this is a very similar situation to that one. It looked scary. He was scared in the moment, but he got up. He walked off the field. It was very slow, but he did walk off the field. After the game, he was walking around again, still kind of limping. He seems to believe that everything structurally is fine. He's going to see how he feels in the morning when he gets up and hopes that maybe somehow he could play on Saturday, which is great news. But it was kind of scary, and it was a weird play, non-contact as it turns out. And for a guy who's dealt with his share of injuries over the years, you can understand why he was initially kind of freaked out by it and worried that something much worse had happened.
So Winker ends up exiting the game. Ildemaro Vargas came into the game to play left field, did have a single in this game. And when it comes to Eddie Rosario, so he did have a hit in this game. He was the Nats starting designated hitter and number 7 batter, 1 for 4 with a single, top of the second, a 2-out opposite field single into left field. We've talked about the season that Rosario has had. He had that wretched April. He had the excellent May, but he has had an awful June. Eddie Rosario's slash line for this month of June, batting average 191, on base percentage 200, slugging percentage 250. His overall numbers for the season are quite bad. OPS 555. If, in fact, Jesse Winker is fine, do you think that it is safe to say, assuming no other injury scares this weekend, that Eddie Rosario is going to be off the team once James Wood is promoted to the majors?
I think that one would make more sense than any of the others. And let's look at the domino effect of the Wood call-up. He has played exclusively left field at AAA since coming back from his injury. It seems pretty clear that's where he's going to be here in D.C., with Jacob Young in center and Lane Thomas in right. Someday that may change, but for now, I think that's what the alignment's going to be. Now, what does that do to Jesse Winker? Bumps him to probably the primary DH spot. Could get some time at first base. He has done it before. He was taking some grounders earlier in the afternoon. Maybe he splits some time there with Joey Meneses, but I think primarily they're going to look at him as a DH, and he's left-handed. They now have a right-handed DH in Harold Ramirez, so that's kind of a natural lefty-righty platoon there. What you don't have a need for anymore is another left-handed outfielder, certainly one who has struggled as much as Rosario has. So to me, the only argument for keeping him would be if you thought he could somehow turn it around and go on another one of those hot streaks that brings some kind of trade value before the end of July. I just don't know where the at-bats are going to come from if everybody else is healthy and James Wood is now a part of the lineup. So my hunch would be that makes the most sense. And it's going to be unfortunate because they were hoping to get a lot more out of this guy, but you may just have to cut bait there. You remember, James Wood also is not on the 40-man roster, which is now full after the call-up of Harold Ramirez. So what that means is somebody has to leave the 40-man. It cannot just be a player optioned to the minors. It cannot be somebody placed on the 10-day or the 15-day IL. You either have to DFA somebody or you have to place somebody on the 60-day IL. So the signs there would seem to me to point to Rosario, but as I said, a lot can happen in 3 days. We already saw stuff happen on day 1. There's still 2 more days, and God knows what else could happen between now and then.
This episode of Nats Chat is brought to you by DC Grays Baseball. DC Grays Baseball is an all-volunteer nonprofit that brings baseball and softball to kids in under-resourced neighborhoods of DC. Inspired by the great Grays team of the Negro Leagues, who played many championship seasons in Washington with stars like Josh Gibson and Buck Leonard, the DC Grays have developed their MVP program. It gives boys and girls in underserved parts of DC the same opportunity to pursue their baseball and softball dreams as do kids from more affluent parts of the DMV. The Grays provide expert coaching, uniforms, equipment, and tournament travel free of charge. A donation of $100 will help a child in DC to participate in the Grays MVP program. The Grays also field a team in the Cal Ripken Summer Collegiate Baseball League. Their 2024 season is now underway. To donate and learn more about the Grays, go to dcgrays.com.
Here's your Rochester Red Wings report for the game played on Friday. As Mark and Al talked about earlier, James Wood had a big night as he's still playing with the Red Wings. 3 for 5 on the evening with 3 runs knocked in. Dylan Cruz in the leadoff spot. He had a double and a single. His OPS so far since getting moved up is at 781. By the way, Yoanna Doan pitched an inning out of the bullpen. He's done so 2 consecutive outings. Now back to the show.
Now the set. Check on the runner. Young dashing off second, breaks for third. The 0-2 is high. The throw down by Jackson goes into left field. Young doesn't realize it. Now he does. He'll get up and he will score. So a stolen base and a throwing error, and the Nationals are finally on the board. It's 3-1 Rays.
Well, it would have been nice to have the 1,058 OPS of James Wood on Friday evening. The Nats in this 3-1 loss at the Rays, just 1 run, just 5 hits, which were comprised of 2 Jacob Young doubles and also 3 singles. The Nats drew 2 walks. The Nats went 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position. The Rays starting pitcher, Zach Eflin, 6 scoreless innings with 6 strikeouts. I mentioned Jacob Young, an interesting game for him. So he had the 2 doubles. That was good to see. Young as the Nats starting center fielder and number 9 batter, 2 for 3 with 2 doubles. And he had a stolen base, but he also had a base running blunder. And he committed a fielding error. Top of the third, Young, a leadoff double to the left center field gap, but he then got tagged out in a rundown between third base and home plate for the second out off a 1-out grounder to Ray's third baseman. He socked Paredes off the bat of Lane Thomas. Young in the bottom of the third committed that fielding error, came on a 2-out RBI single by Paredes to center field. And then Young in the Nats' 1-run 7th, a 2-out opposite field double to right field, despite having been down to the count at 1.12. And he then had to steal a third base, and that steal of third base prompted a throwing error by the Rays catcher Alex Jackson, allowing Young to score to cut the Nats deficit to 3-1. So a lot with Jacob Young in this game. The 2 doubles, the stolen base, and the speed essentially causing that throwing error that led to the run, but also the fielding error and also a base running blunder. So a lot to account for with Jacob Young in this game.
Yeah, a whole lot there. The base running blunder, I'm not going to put on him. I don't know what else he's supposed to do. That was one of those, the ball was hit to the absolute worst possible place, and I don't know what he could have done in that moment. I actually give him credit. He kept that rundown going long enough to allow Lane Thomas to at least get to second base. So I think he made the best of a bad situation there. The fielding play, it's funny, he was noting before the game taking fly balls in center field about how difficult it is, first time at Tropicana Field, to read balls in the air off the off-white, I guess, roof and all the catwalks and everything up there. It turns out that wasn't the issue. It was a bounce off the spongy turf that got him, and maybe he wasn't quite ready for what that was going to entail as well. So I chalk that up to a guy playing for the first time at this field. Doesn't excuse it, but I think that's probably what happened for him in the field. The stolen base, that to me felt like a classic case of we aren't doing anything to score runs right now. I'm in a position to make it happen myself. I'm just going to make it happen. It's an 0-2 count with 2 outs on CJ Abrams, and he takes off for third, forces the bad throw, and comes in to score. That to me just felt like hey, whatever happens, I'm just going to try to score us a run here and try to get something going. So good on him for that. I think overall, pretty good game for him with a little blemish in there as well.
If he can just hit a little more, you're talking about a guy having a really good season already with the defense and the base running. If you go by Baseball Reference's wins above replacement for this regular season, Jacob Young is number 2 among all Nats position players coming into Friday, 2.1 B-WAR. That is tremendous for a guy who wasn't even on the Major League roster to begin this regular season. And now that we're at the numerical midpoint, all you have to do is double up the stats. He's on pace to have 4+ wins above replacement for this season, which is shocking. I mean, nobody would have anticipated that. That is something. I give the guy a lot of credit. And again, that's come with offense that for the most part has been lackluster. He for a while was getting on base at a pretty good clip, but that has slowed down. He hasn't hit for much power. If he can just get the offense up a little bit, you're talking about plus defense, plus base running. He's really done a good job overall this season.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because you think about all the top young outfielders they have that are here and on the way, and some of them coming very soon and others coming down the road. And I think most of us would have said that Jacob Young probably is going to get squeezed out at some point. And man, maybe he makes a nice fourth outfielder for them at some point. But simply by virtue of getting here first, he was given the opportunity to play center field and be the everyday guy there and to sort of stake his claim to it. And so far, he's done almost everything in his power to say, hang on, I don't care who else is coming. I can be the guy out here. Defensively, I don't think there's any question he can be that guy. But as you say, it's going to have to come at the plate, and there's going to have to be some more consistency. The good thing is when he does get on, it feels like most of his hits, and then obviously the base running, it's meaningful stuff. There's not a lot of wasted hits, I don't think, with him. He just needs to get on more and allow himself to do those things. And in the long run, if he can be a great defensive center fielder who runs the bases well and just gets on base enough and bats ninth on a team that in theory has a really good lineup 1 through 8, you can get away with that. The problem is we don't know if the rest of the 1 through 8 is going to be good enough to afford that. And can he do enough? How many guys over the years have we talked about? Great defensive center fielder, speedy, just can't hit enough. We've seen more than a few of those over the years. But he's in an interesting position because he's kind of got there first. And so for now, that job is his. It's not going to be James Wood's. And we'll see whenever Dylan Cruz debuts. But if Jacob Young is still playing in elite center field, Gold Glove caliber center field, Dylan Cruz may end up at a corner position.
It's funny. He's doing what Victor Robles was supposed to be doing and what Robles did in 2019, right? Great defense, great base running, and just enough offense. And again, the offense for Young, you'd like it to be better. But as long as it's just like at least decent, you can live with it because the other stuff is so good. So Young at 2.1 B-WAR coming into Friday. C.J. Abrams at 2.8, top 10 among all National League position players in WAR per Baseball Reference for the regular season. But can we talk about Abrams and the base running stuff? So Abrams on Friday evening as the Nats starting shortstop and number 1 batter, 0 for 2 with 2 hit by pitches. Speaking of Victor Robles, the ghost of Victor Robles was ever present at the Trop on Friday evening. Abrams top of the first, a leadoff hit by pitch. Abrams top of the 7th, a 2-out hit by pitch. But he then got picked off and tagged out in an attempted steal of second base for the 3rd out. We love C.J. Abrams. There's so much to like about C.J. Abrams. But man, this guy gets picked off so much. This has got to stop. When we talk about the base running issues with the Nats, the truth is, and it's an inconvenient truth, but it's the truth, C.J. Abrams is a part of this, and he's got to clean this up.
I think he's the number 1 issue right now for them in that department. And he's doing everything else really well, but this is a significant blip for him. This is now the 8th time he's been picked off. That includes just the straight pick-off diving back into first and the so-called pick-off caught stealing, where you get caught jumping too soon, but the pitcher has the pick-off attempt and then you get in a rundown between first and second. So 8, that's the most in the major leagues. Now, interestingly enough, number 2 on that list is Bobby Witt Jr. of the Royals, a player that we and others have tried to compare to C.J. Abrams in terms of development, being 1 year ahead of him, just got the huge $300 million contract and is really blossoming into a star in Kansas City. You would love for C.J. Abrams to duplicate that, maybe without the base running issues that Bobby Witt has had. So it has to be cleaned up. They have talked to him about it. They need him to be paying more attention. They need him not to get careless. I mean, I saw the play in San Diego the other day where he just casually went back into first base. It cannot happen. And the problem is, it's like sort of like back with Robles. When it happens, you think, okay, that's going to make something click in their mind and say, okay, I got to be on high alert every time I'm out there. I can't let anything like that ever happen again. So when it happens again just a few days later, it really stings and it makes you say to yourself, what's going on in this guy's head? He's supremely talented. He's a smart player in a lot of the other things that he does. I think he's just getting careless out there. He's got to clean that up and just stay engaged all the time when he's on the bases and don't make careless outs. There's just no excuse for it, not on a regular basis like this.
That out in San Diego is the kind of thing that would get a lesser player benched, maybe in game. I mean, could you imagine if Robles had done that? What would Davey Martinez have said and done to Robles had Robles done what Abrams did in San Diego? So yeah, I mean, he overall is doing so many good things, but man, that is an issue. And, you know, to this issue of Nats players getting picked off at first base, this was a thing last season, right? And presumably it's one of the things that cost Eric Young Jr. his job as the Nats first base coach. Well, what about Gerardo Parra? I mean, all the talk about the great job he was doing earlier this season. Do we put some of this on Parra? A first-time first base coach, and what's happening with these guys getting picked off like crazy?
It's easy to make that connection and say, hey, the guy who is the first base coach is the base running coach, and it's their job to both in the moment be on top of what's going on, but even more than that, to help them every day get better at reading pitchers and doing all the little fundamental things you have to do to become a good base runner. So sure, it's fair to put some of this on him. I don't put all of it. I don't think that's fair either. I think ultimately it's up to the players to know what they're doing out there and to not get caught. And, there are mistakes of technique, and that's the kind of thing that you would say is coachable. But careless mistakes, just not paying attention, you can tell the guy all you want, pay attention. If they aren't doing it in the moment, who's that on? It's on the player. So I think it's a combination, but it is a reminder that we spent the first month plus of the season raving about their base running and saying, well, boy, I think Parr is making a difference there. It has gone way southward, as we have discussed plenty over the last month plus. And when that happens, you do have to point out that the coach takes at least some of the responsibility for that as well.
The best way to learn a language? Immersion. Living where the language is spoken and using it every day. But if that's not in the cards this year, you could still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Here's a special deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners for a limited time at babbel.com/natschat. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/natschat. That's spelled BABBEL.com/natschat. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hi Nats fans, this is Tim Newmark, DC area composer, longtime Nationals fan, and proud composer of the Nats Chat podcast theme song. If you're enjoying the music and would like to hear more, check out timnewmark.com/streaming or just search for Tim Newmark wherever you listen to music. To find the rest of the song you're hearing now, search for the title Double in the Sun. Go Nats!
Are you looking for tickets to an upcoming event? That's why you should download the Game Time app. Create an account and use code NATSCHAT for $20 off your first purchase. You get cheaper tickets and it helps the podcast a bit. Sounds like a smooth 6-4-3 double play. Again, create an account and redeem the code NATSCHAT for $20 off. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Here's the pitch. Swing a long drive left field. Forget about it. Way back it goes, and that one is long gone. Jose Siri with a tape measure homer, his 10th of the year. And the Rays are on the board with a 1-0 lead.
Well, that starting pitcher in this 3-1 loss at the Rays on Friday evening was Mitchell Parker. He allowed 2 runs in 5 innings, 5 strikeouts versus 1 walk. He gave up 6 hits, which were a home run, a double, and 4 singles. He issued a wild pitch. He did throw a good number of pitches over the 5 innings, 92 pitches, 59 strikes versus 33 balls. The homer was a leadoff homer by Jose Siri to left field in the bottom of the second for a 1-0 Rays lead. The homer went a projected 405 feet per Statcast, but Parker did retire each of the last 7 batters he faced. What'd you think about Mitchell Parker in this game?
I thought this is kind of becoming a typical Mitchell Parker start, which is it's not perfectly clean. He gets into some trouble, gives up a run or two. But right at that moment that you think it's all going to fall apart on him, he gets it together and actually finishes really strong. It was very similar to what he did in Colorado in his last start. And so I give him a lot of credit. The at-bat of the game from his standpoint, in the bottom of the third, bases loaded, 2 outs. He's got to face Jose Caballero. It's already 2-0. It could be a lot worse. And he ends up striking him out on 3 pitches, finishing him off with a beautiful splitter to end that inning, get out of the jam. And he goes on to retire the last 7 batters he faced. So yeah, the pitch count was a little high. You'd love for him to go more than 5 innings when you're only giving up 2 runs. But I think the number one thing Mitchell Parker has done since debuting here in April is run prevention. He's doing a good job of minimizing damage. It's not always the prettiest. It's not dominant for the most part, but it's effective, and he pretty much gives them a chance to win every time he takes the mound. And for a young pitcher, you would imagine is going to learn and grow and get better over time, I think that's a great skill to have right now, the kind of thing that you would expect more from a veteran pitcher than a rookie.
And as a 2020 fifth round pick, a guy called up to the majors on April 15th, that he still has not had like a blow up start. He still has not had a start in which he got wrecked. That really says something really good about him, you know? I mean, just like taking a step back and examining it. 14 starts, ERA of 3.32, whip of 1.12, and that is a consistent 3.32 ERA over the 14 starts. There are a lot of ways to get to a 3.32 ERA over 14 starts. He has been a steady Eddie. He and Jake Irvin in that regard, like you know what you're getting start in, start out. As good as Mackenzie Gore can be, you don't necessarily know what you're getting start in, start out with him. He's kind of all over the place. There's a real volatility with Gore that you don't have with Irvin and Parker, and I give Parker so much credit for that. He has been reliable. He has been consistent. And again, he has yet to really get shellacked in any of these outings.
Yeah, and to do that this early on, right from the get-go, I think is a real positive in his corner. How many rookie pitchers have we seen over the years who things start to go south and they can't get it back together? It falls apart on them. Not even rookies, older guys that we've seen that happen to. Guys who've gotten tons of chances over the years. And so for this kid, in his first 2 months in the big leagues, to have the poise to not let anything rattle him, to finish strong, it's not like these are starts where, okay, he gets off to a good first time through the lineup, then he starts struggling the second time through, and, well, he's got a couple runners on, Dave's got to come out and pull him from the game. No, he is finishing better than he started in a lot of these games, including the last two. The kind of maturity you expect from somebody who's been in the league a lot longer than him. And so if there is room for growth for him, and you'd like to think there is, he's setting the baseline pretty high now for him to try to exceed that. It makes you think, okay, what can he become once he just gets a little more experience under his belt?
That's bullpen in this 3-1 loss at the Rays on Friday evening. 3 Nats relievers combined to allow 1 run in 3 innings with 3 strikeouts. Jacob Barnes in the bottom of the 6th allowed a run on a leadoff homer by Jose Siri, who, yes, did hit 2 home runs in this game. And this was some homer by Siri off Barnes. A bomb to center field for a 3-0 Rays lead. The homer winner projected 428 feet per Statcast, but Dylan Floro tossed a scoreless bottom of the 7th with 2 swinging strikeouts, and Jordan Weems tossed a scoreless bottom of the 8th. This game on Friday evening was the first of 17 games in 17 days for the Nats to conclude the pre-All-Star break portion of the season. No scheduled off days for the Nats until the All-Star break. You know, we'll see if we do get a rainout or two in here, but this is another one of these brutal stretches. So when it comes to the bullpen, that's something to be paying attention to here. Barring the unforeseen with the weather, this is going to be a stretch in which you have no off days, and reliever usage, bullpen usage is certainly going to be top of mind for Davey Martinez.
Yeah, and from afar, watching the San Diego series, I did kind of think to myself, was there some domino effect from Coors Field taking place in San Diego, specifically for the bullpen that didn't look like the same group that we've seen most of this year? Maybe, hopefully, the off day between San Diego and Tampa was good for them, and this can kind of allow them to reset. And like you said, this is a really tough stretch they're about to go through. I'll be curious, knowing that, will Davey push the starters a little bit more? There have been a few times he's let guys go up over 100 pitches, but it really hasn't been that much. Could this be the week or two that we start to see that, just for the sake of saving the bullpen? It gets kind of case by case. You have to decide, depends on the game situation, who it is, who you're willing to push, who you're not. But at some point that may have to happen, because 5 innings a night when you're playing 17 in a row is asking a whole lot out of a bullpen that has already had a lot asked of it through the first half of the season.
So 38-43, exactly halfway into the regular season, puts the Nats on pace for a 76-win season. Not bad. I think there is a feeling that we all have, though, that this second half of the season could be better than the first half, with James Wood coming. Big question, of course, will be, does the pitching continue to be as good as it has been? And of course, James Wood could be the start of a cavalry of high-level prospects coming to the Nats at the major league level over the next few seasons. In theory, Dylan Cruz could be coming. I did want to ask you about Brady House. We have not talked about this. So he is still at AA-Harrisburg. He's had a good season, maybe not a great season. Are you hearing anything about him being promoted to AAA? Because obviously if House is going to be promoted to the majors this season, he would have to be promoted to AAA sometime at least relatively soon.
Right. I've kind of similar to Dylan Cruz. In my mind, I've been thinking early July, pre-All-Star break. If it happened by that point, then you could say there's a chance that we see him in the big leagues come September. I feel like he's getting there. I mean, he's certainly hitting for power, which is something they've wanted to see. I think by all counts, the defense has been pretty good at third base. He's still very young as a high school kid when he was drafted. So I don't think they feel pressure to do it, but I sure would like to see it happen before the season is over, even if it means it's not until, August, September, and it doesn't mean he's debuting in the big leagues this year. At least get a glimpse of what he can do at AAA, because then he comes to spring training next year and in theory could be competing for the job. There's a broader question. We don't have to really get into it right now, but I was thinking about this recently. We've seen Trey Lipscomb, the bloom kind of come off the rose somewhat in terms of maybe what they really think of him as an everyday player or as a utility guy who's been bouncing back and forth, AAA in the majors. Nick Senzel has not been great for them. I think we know that. But he is arbitration eligible and is under team control for another year. If Brady House isn't ready on opening day next year, but you think he's close, would they bring Nick Senzel back to at least start next season at third base as a kind of hold down the fort until Brady House is ready? If not, are you going to go sign another free agent next winter? There is a question there that as we play out the second half of the season, I think it'll be interesting to see how that goes. As much as we thought of Nick Senzel as a very short term, maybe even trade by the deadline if he got off to a good start this year, it's not out of the question that he's still here to begin next year if they're just waiting on House to be ready.
I mean, it would be awesome to have House, Cruz, Wood all starting next season at the major league level, but we know that things don't always go exactly as you want them to go. This installment of the Nats Chat podcast brought to us by the DC Grays. DC Grays Baseball, an all-volunteer nonprofit that brings baseball and softball to kids in under-resourced neighborhoods of Washington, D.C. The Grays' 2024 season now underway. To donate and learn more about the Grays, visit dcgrays.com. You can hit us up on X at Nats_chat. You can email the podcast, including if you would like to sponsor the show. We'd love to have you on board. Big things happening. James Wood is coming. Email Tim Shovers at natschatpodcast@gmail.com. You can check out our website, natschatpodcast.com, in which you can purchase a Nats Chat podcast t-shirt. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat are courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat podcast.
Now the lefty's ready. Looking at the runner at first, kicks, delivers to the plate, and Wood belts it high in the air to deep center field. Back goes Sanoa at the warning track, at the wall, and it is gone. Goodbye! For the second day in a row, bang! Zoom goes James Wood to the right of the 400-foot marker and landing at the base of the batter's eye screen in center field. It's a 2-run shot to tie the game here in the 5th inning. 2 games, 2 homers for James Wood.